All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Good morning to everybody who's here. Thank you for attending DBHD's CBG ESG Fiscal Year 21 workshop. I'm gonna start by introducing everyone from our team who's here today. We have Interim Director Lily Williams. We have our Deputy Director Denise Hill, Asset Manager Linda McClure, Isaac Gaylord, who's our City Solicitor. He'll be talking about conflict of interest today. And then myself, who's the project manager for CDBG ESG funds. We also have our consultants from Civitas, so Eric Chatham, who will be giving today's presentation, as well as Kyle Jenkins, who specializes in ESG compliance. For anyone who's attending today, you'll automatically be placed on mute. So if any questions, be sure to use your raise hand feature. At that point, we'll unmute you and you can pose your question to the group. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to let Isaac dive right into conflict of interest.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. So I'm going to hopefully keep this brief, and hopefully this is something that doesn't become an issue for any of you. So up on the screen, you can see a conflict of interest disclosure form. Anyone who ends up receiving funding through this grant program has to fill out this form. We're required by federal statute and also by state statute to ensure that no one we're giving money to essentially is or has a family member who controls how we give out money. And basically what that means is that you as an applicant or a close family member of yours can't be an elected or appointed city official. So if that applies to you, you will need to fill out this form. I mean, everyone will need to fill out the form. And just to be a little more specific about it, one thing that the basis for all of this is the Hatch Act, which is a federal law which we're required to comply with. So in addition to prohibiting a conflict of interest, which would be having responsibilities over the money and then receiving a benefit from city or federal money, there's some other prohibitions that apply to you or employees of the organization whose salaries are funded by federal grant money. If you have grant money that's funding an employee, they are not allowed to run for elected office if they're totally funded by federal dollars. Additionally, they're not allowed to influence elections. As a corollary to that, you can't use the money, and I think this is probably something that all of you already know because it's pretty straightforward. You can't use any of this money as political donations or to hold events for nominees for office. So the corollary to the federal regulations that I sort of just talked about briefly is the Pennsylvania State Ethics Act. So if you are subject to any of the federal regulations, that also means you're going to be subject to the State Ethics Act, because that applies to anyone who holds a state or local position in Pennsylvania. So, Lily's subject to it as a department director. I'm subject to it up here in the solicitor's office. Any of our elected officials are subject to it. And there are really three things that prohibits. It also prohibits a conflict of interest, which is defined the same way, which is, receiving a monetary benefit and also being in a position where you can affect who gets the money. The other thing that's prohibited under the State Ethics Act that is of particular note for all of you is if you or a spouse, sibling, or child have an elected office with the city, elected or appointed office, you're not allowed to enter into contracts over $500 with the city. There are a couple exceptions to that, but they're pretty narrow. So I would just encourage you when you're filling this out to think about that. And if you have questions, to reach out to the staff in DBHD. It's in all of our interest to get everyone the right answers and make sure that we're complying with both the state and federal laws, because as much as they apply to you, they apply to the city as well. So, oh, and I forgot the third thing that's prohibited, which I believe that everyone also knows under the state act, which is you're not allowed to use grant money to influence an election. Basically, that's, you know, your old school graft, corruption, handing someone a bribe. So that's the most straightforward thing, and hopefully the thing we don't have to worry about. But again, if you do have any, you know, questions about this, concerns, please reach out to the staff in DBHD. They're very knowledgeable. We're always available up here in the Law Bureau to help. And I think that about covers it.
Great, thank you, Isaac. All right, Eric, if you want to take it away and dive into the presentation.
Thank you, Caitlin. And yes, thank you, Isaac, for joining us this morning. So this morning I have a brief webinar, brief PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to share with you quick highlights and overview of the application process. I'm going to share with you PDFs that you will access, one being the conflict of interest form that Isaac just reviewed, as well as the actual application and a couple other forms that are required. So I'm going to begin with this PowerPoint. One moment, I'll get it started here. So for those of you that may not be aware, the city is making available HUD funding from the Community Development Block Grant Program, as well as the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Eligible applicants include other public agencies or departments, nonprofit entities, and in any case, you must be in good standing with both the state and the city of Harrisburg. Sorry for the typo there. This year, the minimum funding request is $20,000, which would be also the minimum award amount. You will see that the application has scoring of up to 100 points. A score of 75 is required. A minimum score of 75 is required to be eligible for funding. Applicants are able to apply for both Cdbg and ESG funding. If you choose to do so, you will need to complete separate applications for each program. Application materials will be posted on the city's web following this workshop, and I will share that website link with you at the end of the presentation. So this year we're getting $500,000 available in community development block grant funding, as well as just under $310,000 in emergency solutions grant program funding. Some of these funds were received by the city for the 2020 program year, which is the program year we are currently in, which means these funds, some of these funds are available right away after the applications are reviewed, vetted, and approved by City Council. The balance of the funds will be made available after October 1st as part of the city's 2021 program year. The application and application materials, as I mentioned, will be available on the Department of Building and Housing at City of Harrisburg's website. And here's a quick link. I'm going to share with you now the actual application PDF. So we will have a fillable PDF on the city's website, again, after the presentation. Pretty straightforward, and we've tried to simplify things as much as possible this year. So first page is pretty straightforward, agency information. I'm going to highlight for you here that every applicant must have a DUNS number, and you must have a CAGE code, and you get your CAGE code from the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. Every agency must be registered with SAM.gov. That's a free registration. If you have not already registered, you must register there. It takes a few days to get registered. So if you intend to apply and have not already received or registered with SAM.gov, you may want to start that right away. Again, it is free. So when you do a Google search for sam.gov, don't let anybody fool you that you don't have to pay. There are services out there that'll help you do this. Trust me, it's very simple to do. So don't pay anybody anything to register, totally free, as is the DUNS number. And most organizations probably already have a DUNS number, but again, if you don't, you'll need that first before you register with sam.gov. Once you're registered with sam.gov, the city will be able to check that registration. And I'll show you as one of the required attachments to your application, you'll print off a confirmation page from sam.gov. So now into the questions. Again, this will be a fillable PDF. And so we're starting, of course, with the project description. For each question, you can see the point value. If there is not a point value next to the question, it's required. And you can take that to mean that it's a threshold type requirement that you must respond to, but there are no points necessarily associated with that question. So you'll provide your project description here in the fillable box. Again, we're going to point to you each time that there's a 200 maximum word count for each of these narrative boxes. So we're asking you to provide a detailed description of your project, which would include a summary of the project, the objectives that the agency and organization will accomplish during the year. These will be fillable checkboxes here and you will see that we're using one application for CDBG and ESG. So be careful, some questions are only for one grant or the other. And you can see based on your responses, the point values for each of your questions. So for CDBG, I noticed many of you that are in attendance this morning have received previous CDBG allocations. Please note that the CDBG requirements require that for a public service either be new or expanding. If you've received funding in the past for your CDBG public service activity, you have to be expanding that service in some way. And so we're going to ask that you describe that and then note that here on question 1. Question 2 has several questions actually associated with it, and this is for ESG applicants only. And these are requirements. So if you're going to be an ESG recipient, you must use HMIS. You must be participating in the continuum of care coordinated entry process. You must have adopted a housing first policy, and you must be an active member of the continuum of care. Assuming that you meet all of those criteria, you also receive a project specific endorsement letter from the continuum of care, and that's cash. And I'm sure all of you that are ESG agencies are familiar with that requirement already. Next, down to the agency summary. This section describes your agency's staffing capacity and program management capacity. So we're asking here for your relevant professional experience for all key staff involved in the program. We'll also be asking for an org chart and staff resumes for all those key staff and project relevant staff. Then some sort of multiple choice here, providing more details about your agency staffing capacity and your grants management experience. You see question 3 and 4 have points associated with them. 5, 6, 7, and 8 are fillable blanks here, or narrative responses, but no points directly affiliated with those 4 questions. The next narrative under agency summary is requesting a project management plan. So how will your staff run the program? How will your management team oversee the program? And so we're looking for details here. We're looking for you to name individuals specifically as to who will be responsible for each aspect of your proposed program. Then we get to the financial management section. As Isaac was mentioning, obviously these are federal funds, come with a lot of financial management requirements. And so we have to document that on as part of our application review. So we're specifically looking here for grant management experience for key staff responsible for financial management. The next applicant or the next question here, we're asking for specific details about your software and how you're able to track your federal funds. You must be able to, or your financial team must be able to specifically track the federal funds as separate from your organization's general fund or unrestricted funds. So we need you to describe the software that you're using. QuickBooks is acceptable, but you would need to describe how you're using QuickBooks and how you have the capacity or the ability to specifically track the use of federal funds. Then we're asking here, again, some of the direct and relevant experience with financial management and grants financial management. Question 10 asks specifically if your organization has a CFO or similar position. Question 11 is regarding matching funds. So for ESG applicants, you must provide 100% matching funds. I'll go over this momentarily, but when I hop back to the PowerPoint. For CDBG applicants, matching funds are not required, but as you can see, with this competitive application process and a minimum score of 75 points, matching funds provided for CDBG or applicants have competitive scoring here. Finally, we're asking on the financial management to you to describe your internal controls and separation of duties. How do you approve payments and how do you manage writing checks or making payments, etc. And how are there separation of duties? Should not be one person reviewing requests for payment, making payments, paying payroll, etc. There needs to be some separation of duties within your organization's financial controls. We're asking for you to describe those roles here. The last section of the application is a statement of need. So why do you think it's important for your program and what are the needs of the community for which you propose to provide this necessary service? We're asking you to describe your target population, the community need, and then how your agency or what the urgency of this need is, and provide supporting data to identify that need or support your statement of the need. And then 2 more questions here about your target populations. You can see where under CDBG, the city is prioritizing services that provide some sort of supportive service for homeless individuals or those at risk of becoming homeless, followed by victims of domestic violence or victims of abuse, then elderly, disabled, or illiterate adults, followed by low to moderate income populations, including public housing residents. And these are the eligible beneficiaries of CDBG programs. So if you say, well, my target population is none of these, well, then you wouldn't be eligible for CDBG funding. And for the ESG program, we're prioritizing projects that provide mental health and substance abuse services or supportive services, the veterans, followed by other eligible populations. Of course, the ESG program is primarily for individuals or households that are either already experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless. And then the last question, no points associated with this part, but describe how partial funding would impact your project. And then at this point, I will go back to the PowerPoint. So Isaac already reviewed and we shared with you the conflict of interest form. So be clear that all members of your board, all senior staff, and all direct program staff must complete this conflict of interest disclosure form as part of your application. So we're asking you to disclose any potential conflicts at the application time. So of course you're going to be, well, I haven't shared this with you yet, but you'll be submitting the application electronically. So we will accept scanned copies of the signed conflict from all of your, again, all board members, all senior staff, and all direct program staff must complete the form as part of the application process. We will also require a board resolution authorizing the application submission itself. We'll share it with you a template. And let me share that with you 1 second. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back with that template. So here is, this will be provided as a Word document. So this is just a template, but you see here, it's a resolution identifying the date and time of your board meeting where the board authorized your agency to submit this application for federal funds to the city of Harrisburg. This is to be copied and placed on your organizational letterhead, and you don't necessarily have to stick precisely to this wording. This is just to be serve as a template or a model for you. Back to the PowerPoint. And so the next thing I'll share with you again is a PDF here of the application checklist. One moment. So this application checklist will be made available on the city's website. It's a PDF. And here's all of the items we will require to be submitted as part of your application. I'll just go through these briefly. Of course, you're going to do the completed application itself, the PDF I was just sharing with you. Completed budget worksheet, which I'll go through momentarily. The completed board resolution authorizing the application. We'll need an organizational chart with employee names and titles. And then the next item, of course, a list of all of the key staff or proposed staff that will be involved, particularly with the proposed program. We need these job descriptions for your executive staff and program staff, followed by resumes for the identified individuals. Again, executive staff, financial staff, and program staff. We need a list of your current board members and the conflict of interest forms from all of the above, right? Board members, program staff, financial staff, and executive staff. We need a year-to-date financial statement. And I'm going to go ahead and say the most recent certified audit, management letter, and agency response. So perhaps some of your agencies have not been completed an official audit. So we need a financial statement prepared. We would prefer one prepared and reviewed by a CPA. But if you have any questions about your acceptability of the financial statements you have, you'll be able to submit a question and we can review that with you. So we need year-to-date financial statement, and if required, if you have an audit, we need an audit or a copy of your most recent audit. If that audit includes a management letter, which is where the CPA provides comments on the audit, and there's any findings or issues identified in that management letter, we would also need copies of the agency's response to your CPA. We need copies of your filed bylaws, and these should be filed with the state. Copy of your certificate of nonprofit status or your IRS award letter. Copies of the organizational's articles of incorporation, again, should be filed with the state. If you're an ESG applicant, as I mentioned in the application, you need a letter of endorsement or support specific for this project or this application from CASH, the Capital Area Council on Homelessness. Need proof of general liability coverage. You only need to provide proof of liability coverage at this point or a certificate of insurance. If you are awarded funding, you will be required to have the city of Harrisburg listed as an additional insured. And finally, sam.gov registration confirmation. So you'll register with sam.gov with your DUNS number, and at that time you'll receive a CAGE number. From that website, you can search for your organization once the registration is complete. And we're simply asked that you print that search page that shows that your organization is registered, and it'll show your address, contact information, DUNS number, and CAGE number. So now back to the topic of matching funds. So again, ESG agencies are required to provide 1-for-1 match or 100% match. CDBG applicants are not required to provide match, but it does provide points, and this will be, again, a competitive application process. So you can provide cash match or in-kind or donated resources. You'll provide documentation of that in your budget. If you identify match at the time of the application, whether you're required to as an ESG agency or doing so to receive those points as a CDBG applicant, you will be required then to identify and track those matching funds in your agency's financial management system, which, as we reviewed, you'll be describing in detail. And then you must also have a commitment letter signed by your board, and this could be as part of your board resolution, identifying and committing those funds as matched to this program. If you do that, and again, ESG agencies are required to do so, then each time in your awarded funds, then each time you submit a request for payment or reimbursement from the city of Harrisburg, you will have to document the use of matching funds. So for example, an ESG agency is required to provide 1-for-1 match. When that ESG agency is awarded and then down the road starts to seek reimbursement from the city for your programming, you'll be required to show the expense and that the agency provided 1-for-1 match or 50%, if you will, of the funding for each line item expense. So again, ESG, this is required. CDBG, not required, but provides for competitive scoring. And you will be required to track this. This will become part of your contract, and you'll report on this with each invoice or request for reimbursement. I'll take this point to remind you, if you're a returning agency, or perhaps some of you might be new applicants interested in providing or applying for this funds. These funds are provided on a reimbursement basis, meaning your agency will have to pay the expense first and then seek reimbursement for eligible costs from the city. So for example, a CDBG public service agency is running a financial literacy program or an after-school program for youth, and you want assistance with salaries to run those programs. You'll have to pay those salaries and then seek reimbursement from the city for those eligible expenses. So these will not be grants that will just be provided to you in a lump sum upfront that you can then use and track. You'll have to submit monthly invoices or requests for reimbursement to the city that match your budget and your funding request. So applications will be made available later today on the Department of Building and Housing Development's website. Applications must be received no later than 5 p.m. Eastern on Friday, May 21st of this year. No late applications will be accepted. And so obviously, if you're submitting this via email, and you can see the email address here, those will be time and date stamped as part of your email submission, and no late applications will be accepted. You're going to submit all of this as one electronic copy via email. We understand that file limitations might require you to submit multiple emails. Please make sure that if that is the case, you identify carefully in your subject line that this is email 1 of 2 or 2 of 2, etc., and then submit the required documentation to this email address. Quick summary of the scoring criteria. As I showed you in the application document itself, we identified the point value for each of the questions. Just a quick summary here. The project description is worth 25 points, or that section is worth 25 points. The agency summary, which describes your capacity and your experience, is worth 30 points. Your financial management capacity, in this is where you're describing your software and your cost controls, is worth 30 points, followed by the statement of need, worth 15 points. So we have roughly a month from now to submit the applications. If after this workshop, and we will open it for questions momentarily, but if after this workshop you have questions or would like clarification on your application, on eligible activities, etc., you will submit those questions to this inbox, the Department of Building and Housing Development at harrisburgpa.gov. All questions will be answered via email in a timely fashion, most likely within 1 business day. But all questions that are submitted, the answers will be aggregated and put into essentially an FAQ style document that will be updated on the city's website as well, along with the rest of the application documents. So again, questions about your application, about eligibility, etc., submit to this email address. And then even if you don't have particular questions, I would encourage you to check the website from time to time to update or to review the FAQs and to see what other people might have been asking in the answers for any kind of clarification or other guidance that might be necessary. So check back from time to time, and certainly before you hit submit on your application, before that deadline, I'd encourage you to review the FAQs, make sure that you didn't miss anything before you submit your application. If you give me one moment, I'm going to stop the PowerPoint and I'm going to pull up the last document, which will be the budget document. One moment, please. So here's the budget worksheet. This will again be, I'm sharing as a Word document. This will be available as a fillable PDF. Fairly straightforward. You might not need all of these line items, but you're going to provide a summary here of your matching funds, perhaps any funds you're leveraging from other programs, donations of in-kind or in-kind services. So you provide all of your funding for the project here as a summary, and then a description of each piece of the work. So if you're asking for salaries, salaries would be one item. If you're asking for utilities, that would be another line item. Equipment or supplies, etc., you would fill out each line item, the total project cost, Cdbg or ESG funds to be used to pay that line item, as well as any match, leverage, or in-kind funds that would be provided for that particular line item. And at the bottom, you can see you add all of that up to show the total project cost and how each fund will be used, or each resource will be utilized. Again, this will be, if your application is approved for funding, this will be utilized as an exhibit in your contract. And as you submit invoices for reimbursement of each of these line items, you'll be required to document that the matching funds, leverage funds, or other donation or in-kind contributions have also been provided. And at this point, we'll be happy to open it up for questions, and I will stop the PowerPoint for the moment and turn it back over to Caitlin. We can see if there's any questions from attendees.
Again, just be sure to use the raise hand feature and we can unmute you for any of the questions.
Well, as perhaps folks are maybe waiting, I do see one hand coming up. So we are hosting a second workshop at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Please understand we're just doing the same presentation. We just want to make sure everybody had an opportunity to attend. So it's not necessary for you to attend both. The only difference is I caught a couple typos that I'm going to fix, but otherwise there was no decisions or new information or anything like that would be shared in the afternoon workshop. So feel free to tune back in or have others in your agency tune in, but certainly don't feel like you are required to or you're missing anything if you don't attend.
Eric, looks like we have a question for Mr. Lesford, so I'm going to go ahead and allow him to talk, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
This is Les Ford from the Heinz Center. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now. Good. There was one term I'm not familiar with, the CAGE code. Could you go over that again, please?
Yes, sir. Happy to do so. When you register with sam.gov.
Oh, stop right there. An acronym, sam.gov. I have no clue what you're talking about.
Yes, sir. That is the System for Award Management.
Thank you.
It's a required federal resource. So any agency or contractor that wishes to receive federal funds must be registered with sam.gov. So nonprofits that want grants, for-profits that want to be a contractor, etc. My company is registered with sam.gov. So that's the actual website, sam.gov.
All right.
You could also Google System for Award Management. Again, it is a free registration and only takes a matter of minutes. But be careful, you don't have to pay for this. So if you, like I said, if you Google search that, there's going to be 1,000 agencies wanting to do it for you for $99 or $250 or something. You don't need help. Trust me, it's simple. You're going to put basically your contact information and your DUNS number. So you have to start with your DUNS number. Now, I would assume at this point, most agencies applying for federal funds have a DUNS number. You're required to have a DUNS number to do just about anything as a nonprofit agency. So make sure you've got a DUNS number first, then go to sam.gov or System for Award Management and register your entity. If you haven't done so, you'll register a new entity. Once you register, they will assign you automatically a CAGE code. It's about a 6-digit code with letters and numbers. CAGE is also another acronym. I don't even know what that acronym is, but you need that code. Again, once you're registered with sam.gov, it will assign it to you automatically, and you'll see that easy enough.
And you mentioned that there was a minimum. The minimum is 20,000. Minimum ask is 20,000. Is there a maximum? Obviously, 500,000 would be a max, but let's find some middle ground there. We
are not advertising a maximum.
And is there an allocation between the two programs?
Yeah, I have that. And I've been involved with this over the years, and there are some common items that have carried forward. There seem to be new or expanded items or emphasis. So my question to you is what resources and what resources is the city bringing to bear on this, given that we only have 30 days to complete this?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, resources for the 30 days.
Just clarification. If I come up with questions and they're clarification, or there is a something that seems to be new or expanded in terms of requirements. For instance, let me give you for instance, in prior years, salaries have been problematic. So I think all of us have pretty much gotten out of the practice of even asking for salary money. But now you're saying it is allowed, but it has to be paid up front and then submitted for reimbursement. So things like that that are new or expanded or tweaked requirements. Will there be resources from the city Cdbg department, building and housing, made available to assist those of us who are having issues or might have issues? Given
sir.
we're in a pandemic, I think that's a fair question. Many of us have been virtually shut down for the last year, or we're operating on a wing and a prayer. So given that we only have 30 days, we might need some assistance. I'll
Yes, sir.
speak for myself.
Yes, sir. Happy to answer that. We can't help you actually prepare your application, but certainly we can provide answers and clarity. So I've shared again from the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will be posted on the website for your future review. But I've shared in the chat feature the email address that you can use. So everyone, if you have a question, I know some of you have relationships with staff from your past work. You must submit your questions, and I've shared it again in the chat, DBHD housing at harrisburgpa.gov. That's our standard email inbox for the department. You must submit your questions to that email address, and we will provide answers directly to you, and then provide everyone the question and the answer. If there's any information that's particular to your agency, of course, we would redact that type of information. But the general theme of your question and the answer that is provided to any will be published as an FAQ for all agencies to review.
Who's
Thank you.
making the assessment?
What team is making the assessment this time?
The combination of housing staff and my team, Civitas consultants. Related to that, there was a question from Ms. Scott. Is there going to be a review application if needed? So yes, all applications will be reviewed in the week following the submission for basic requirements. Did you submit everything that was required? If there are simple missing items, then we will contact your agency and say, hey, for example, we're missing resumes for so-and-so, or we're missing a budget worksheet. And you'll be given a few days to respond and provide that information. Not an extended period of time to create that, but we'll give you the benefit of the doubt that something was just left off on the submission. From that point forward, though, you'll be given a period of time to correct any missing items, but we wouldn't ask you to provide any further clarity or expand on narratives, etc. We will accept your application as is once we review for just actually having received all the necessary documents.
Question on resumes. Obviously, the senior staff resumes, I understand, but I have food services workers, janitors. Are you expecting to have a resume from my janitor?
No, sir. As we list out in the PowerPoint and in the checklist document, you'll see that we only need resumes from senior staff or executive staff, whatever you call those, your financial staff, and key program staff. That's it. We need an org chart with everything, but then we want, as you can see on that document checklist, we want the job descriptions and names for the key folks that I just mentioned, and then resumes for those key folks.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
The turnaround time?
Turnaround time for that, that's in the original application?
No.
Yes, sir.
Where they make the determination of the awards.
And once we get past May 21st, what's your timetable for contacting us saying we're in the running or something has been awarded?
The award date.
So from that point, I think we'll give ourselves about a month to do the review process, because we need to make sure everyone who wants to submit an application has until the 21st. So then we'll meet as a team and start reviewing applications.
Now, the elephant in the room is the CARES money that at some point presumably will be coming down the pike.
There is no CARES Act money, sir.
Right, this is strictly CDBG. That was
For
my
lack of a
first-
better term, this is our regular annual entitlement that the city always receives annually.
And do you have any insight in terms of how that CARES money will be processed through your particular office, not you personally, but through the Building and Housing Office? How's
The
that going?
CARES Act funds were allocated in March of 2020, and the city has already budgeted for those. There was a business assistance program. There was a rent, mortgage, and utilities program. Those programs have only recently closed, and there may be additional opportunities, but there will be no additional funds for outside agencies to apply for any CARES Act money at this point.
Is there anyone who can define an outside agency? I mean, I run a senior center. The CARES money was earmarked for seniors and programs and things like that. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I'm just trying to get a sense of the extent to which one might influence the other. And if
Sir,
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. There are no CARES Act funds available in this application, and those funds were allocated last year via City Council. So they don't influence, one doesn't influence the other at this point. We can speak with you offline if you have further questions about the CARES Act funds, but no, sir, they're not included in this application, and we're not anticipating any additional CARES Act funding to be allocated to the city, and likewise not anticipating having any requests for applications for CARES Act funding.
Right. Obviously, I'm not in the mix, but let's take a hypothetical. If there were CARES money allocated for a specific area or program or agency, could that CARES money be used as matching funds for this request?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Really?
I'm confused by that, but I'll go.
Well, you can never use federal funds to match federal funds.
Gotcha.
So that wouldn't have been applicable. But again, the CARES Act money was primarily utilized by the city to run a small business assistance program, as well as to provide rent, mortgage, and utility relief for residents of Harrisburg. That's where the bulk of those funds went. Yeah, at this point, no, the CARES Act money is not available for anyone outside the city to apply for at this point. Those programs have closed. And no, if you did receive CARES Act money, it wouldn't have been an eligible source of match for another federal program.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Are there
Okay.
any other
4.5.
questions? I know we have some participants here who are coming in from a phone. So if you are on the phone and you do want to pose a question, to raise your hand, you can press *9. Then for the unmute feature, it would be *6. But if there are no further questions, we can close this out. And, oh, Eric?
It looks like there are a couple hands raised from phone numbers. Hard for me to see the full phone number, but
yeah, phone number ending in 276. I'll allow you to talk. So if you can go ahead and select *6.
Hi, good morning. This is Kayla Gower calling from Shalom House. Morning, everybody. I joined a little bit late here and I am on the phone, so I actually just wanted to find out if the presentation at 2 o'clock is going to be at the same meeting link.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I can just jump in like the same invite for the 10 o'clock meeting.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. This was very helpful. I appreciate it. I just think I'm going to watch again at 2 o'clock so I can see the slides.
You're more than welcome. Absolutely.
and I'll just remind everybody that we have a couple little typos to fix, but all of the final information will be posted on the department's website later today, including the PowerPoint.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kayla. And then the caller coming in from number ending in 357, I'll go ahead and allow you to talk as well.
Hi, this is Sabrina from the Latino Center. I just heard that you are going to post the PowerPoint information and the forms today, correct?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you confirm the website?
cityofharrisburg.gov,
Okay.
the harrisburgpa.gov on the DBHD site. It was on this PowerPoint as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Are you able to, I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but yes, ma'am.
No, it was like a like I couldn't hear you guys and I couldn't see the slides a lot. So that's why I'm, trying to reach out and ask this question.
Yes, ma'am. Not sure if you are able to see your screen. I'm sharing that again with you. But as Caitlin said, it's harrisburgpa.gov.
Yeah, now I can see it.
There you go. And Caitlin, is that correct that it shows up as Bureau of Building and Housing? Is that or should that be
yes.
department?
Yes, it does. That's correct. And I can put the link in the chat feature as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you're trying to make a comment or ask a question, similar to where you changed your name, you should be able to find that little blue square and unmute yourself. It's also a bottom bar at the bottom of your screen. In my screen, I see it at the bottom left, little microphone that says mute or unmute.
Yeah, I'm not.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm calling. My name is Yvonne Johnson from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women. And I was actually given a link and wasn't able to get in the way, I guess, I didn't receive the link to be able to be viewed, if you will. So I'm not even sure how I got on, except that I followed a link that was given to me. So I'm not able to change any screens. I'm not able to send anything to the chat. And I was just emailing you to see if I can just get my information to you in that way.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we see you. You're identified on our screen, so we have you registered as in attendance. Were you able to see the presentation?
I was able to see it, but I wasn't able to change anything. I guess so. I just wanted to make sure you can see that information. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll be registered as attending.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. We have a question from Daryl Reinford from CCU. So Daryl, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Yeah, I just had to say, I don't think any of us that signed on through the webinar, we can only see the three of you from the city. So we can't change anything on our pictures, and we couldn't chat and we couldn't talk before. So can you hear me?
Yep,
yes, sir.
We can hear you. Yep.
So just so you know, those instructions weren't, I think it's the webinar setting that you're using. So that I'm glad you can see us, but none of us can see ourselves.
Got you. Okay.
And I get the one question I did have, the 100% match, is that a new sort of federal requirement? Because in previous years, I thought it was 25% for ESG.
No, sir. Sorry for any confusion. It's always been 100% match has been required always under the federal guidelines for ESG program.
Okay.
All right. So then there is a question from Bree Puntick from CEO. So Bree, I will allow you to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, no, I was just raising my hand to confirm the same things that the others have had. Yeah, I think for whatever reason, the setting doesn't let us see that we are on. So just, especially since it's a required document to have that certificate of attendance, I'm sure like most of us, I just wanted to confirm that you guys had me as attending, so.
Yep, and what I'll do, I will, once we sort through all who attended both sessions, I will send people an email for confirmation that they're in our records that they attended.
That sounds awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just to add to what Lynn just said, we are recording this session. So the recordings will be made available should anybody need to watch again. But from that recording, we have a list of all the attendees. So your names are officially recorded as well as phone numbers. And as you know, you had to register to get the link. So Caitlin has all your organizational information from who registered. So we should be able to cover it and make sure everybody's in attendance.
Looks like there's a raised hand from George Payne from Cash. So George, I will allow you to talk.
This is Deb from Cash. I don't know if perhaps I'm signed on as George. Daryl's observation is valid for me too. I think George, I'm not even sure he's present, but nevertheless, I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. And lastly, it looks like the raised hand from Rhonda Mays. Rhonda, you should be able to go ahead and speak now.
Caitlin, you might want to tell the number that they have to push if she's on the phone.
I don't think so. If you are on a phone, then you can hit *9 to request to speak, and then *6 is to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. I never went through that before. Okay, now I have my...
Yeah, you have to either mute your computer or get away from your computer, and then you can speak on the phone without that.
I'm trying to... Okay, this is not working for me. I'll just email my question. I'm sorry.
Okay, yep. I'll be on my email today, so feel free to email DBHD Housing at harrisburgpa.gov, and we'll get right to you, Rhonda. There is also a raised hand from Pastor Robertson from the Rock Church.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge that I am here for the seminar and I appreciate the information, but I can't see myself, and I just want you all to know that I was present for the presentation. So thank you for the information.
Certainly, thank you for being here.
Right.
Okay, I don't have, oh wait. Yep, we have another raised hand from Nardia.
Hello, good afternoon. I would like to know if you guys pay, I know certain grants only give funding in certain instances. They don't pay for acquisition in real estate, for the real estate grant. They just would pay for the funding after you've already acquired the property. I was just wondering what the if you in fact help pay for acquisition of property?
Hi, good afternoon. At this time, no, sir, we are not using or making CDBG or ESG funds available for acquisition for real estate. If you're speaking of residential property, the city also receives home funding, and will be perhaps at this time we don't have any of that funding available. But if we do have funds available in the future, we'll be hosting a similar workshop. And in that case, again, for residential, for housing, funds would be available for acquisition and development or rehabilitation of residential structures. But at this time, we're not using CDBG or ESG for anything to do with real estate acquisition or improvements to buildings or anything like that. Just as you said, the services offered there within.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
It looks like that's all of the raised hands that I see. If there's any other further questions, again, please feel free to direct your questions to dbhdhousing@harrisburgpa.gov. That goes directly to our department, so it's important that that's the email that you're using for all of your questions. We're happy that you all were here today. It's a pleasure working with you all. So thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Have a good afternoon.